Hello and welcome to Module 3. How's the journey going so far? In the beginning here, we had to look at our stories around self-doubt, what is stopping us, what's the emotions behind it, just really taking a look at what's going on for us and the patterns that we're building in our lives. Then we went to Module 2 to self-awareness, because without awareness, we do not have change. So we had to become aware of what we called the drama triangle. And where are we sitting in it, in these stories of self-doubt, in these stories of judgment and things like that, when things are happening in our life. And now we're looking at self-acceptance. So self-acceptance has a lot of connotations around it. So we're going to explore what that means for you and how self-acceptance can help us on this journey to liberate ourselves. So to begin, we're just going to start our tapping. And so tap along with me. I chose to tap on the Serenity Prayer today. And you can use affirmations, poems, prayers, anything that kind of gets you grounded that feels good for you. And just tap along with what feels right for you and add the words that feels right for you. So God, source, divine, whatever is your higher power, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, trusting that things will work out, and trusting and knowing that I am on the right path. And just take a nice easy breath in. Just feel the tension move out of your body and become present. So we will jump in to Module 3. So in this module, coming up to this module, you might have felt a bit of resistance, or what we call resistance. And what that looks like is not wanting to do it, not feeling engaged in it, thinking that I'll do it another time, or that we start to feel uncomfortable, like, this isn't right for me because I'm feeling like I'm out of my zone, which definitely you will be getting there, because our safety is created by feeling in control. And the way we feel in control is using the patterns that we usually have been in. And so we know what's going to happen, we're predictable, we know where it's going to go. So when we start asking you to look at things in a different way, it might even cause confusion. So we want to be aware of what all this looks like for ourselves and know that it's normal and that it's part of the process to grow. Because if we go back to the old patterns where we're comfortable, where we don't have that feeling on our belly, where we don't feel like we want to just stop it because it's not going to work, if we never get to that place, then we're never going to be growing, and we will do the same things that we've always done. And just as Albert Einstein said, you cannot change anything with the same thinking that created it. So things we're going to go over in this module are practicing self-acceptance, is letting go of that self-sabotage, the strategies that are keeping us stuck, that help with that self-doubt, with that drama triangle. We also want to look at the negative, so-called the negative emotions of shame, guilt, self-judgment in a new way, not something that we're familiar with. And then we're going to tap into unconditional love and acceptance. And so for a lot of us, acceptance means that we are agreeing with. And a lot of people will say, well, if I say I love and accept myself, but I'm out of shape, I'm overweight, how can I accept that? Because I need to improve. Well, if you look at it as, if we can love ourselves and accept ourselves in this moment, we are more likely to achieve success going forward. Because when we don't love ourselves, I might go into that shame and guilt that I should be healthier. I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. I'm judging myself. Why couldn't I exercise more? Why couldn't I eat better? Those kind of things. So if you were to look at yourself as someone else and want to help motivate them, would you shame them? Would you guilt them? Trying to motivate them? It's not likely going to go very far. So it's the same with us. So when we are down on our bodies, down on ourselves, not accepting something that is even external to us, then we're not acknowledging what is actually happening in this moment. Just like when somebody is angry, I've seen a lot of people with this. Anger is a tough emotion, and it's not very well accepted, especially by women. With men, it's a little bit more acceptable because it's almost like, oh, well, it's okay for them to express their anger. But for women, it's not so much. And so when we've been brought up where we're not allowed to show what our feelings are, then we start to suppress them. And so when we suppress anger, then how often have you heard, well, people were fine, so we're making a conscious decision to hold this anger in when we're at work, when we're dealing with people, and we get a hold of it. But then when we get home, when we're in our safe zone, our spouse, our children, our dog, whoever is there happens to get the verbal backlash of all of this anger, resentment, or whatever that's been going on for us. So we are not accepting in the moment. We haven't learned how to accept in the moment. If you think about a work situation, if something makes me really mad, people will either blurt it out or withdraw and kind of bite their tongue, as they say. So when we do that, what if would the difference be that, you know what, you are upsetting me and I'm upset by the situation. So I just need to go deal with this and come back and talk to you. So that way we keep control of the power, we acknowledge how we're feeling, and then we can find a solution to move forward from that. So acceptance from the dictionary means consenting to receiving something offered. So that can be looked at in many different ways. So if I consent that I'm feeling angry, which is being offered by my body, then I'm with what is. And acceptance, in the terms that we're talking about when we're looking at healing, is being with what is in this moment. So when we look at, I'm wearing a orange colored shirt, that is what is. If I was to say, well, I wish I had worn the blue shirt and I'm so disappointed, if somebody else was wearing one and I expected them to wear a blue shirt, then I'm not accepting and I'm saying, well, I'm very disappointed you didn't do this. And so I'm not being with what is in that moment. Some people might think, well, if I suffer from anxiety, I don't want to accept that I have anxiety. I want to fight it. I want to figure it out. I want to do something different. But when we don't accept that, geez, in this moment I have anxiety, then we continue on our suffering because we're not acknowledging it. Have you ever seen a small child throwing a tantrum? If we don't allow them to work out this tantrum, it gets worse, right? We try and quiet them and they double their efforts and scream more and kick more because they are releasing. Kids are great at releasing what's real for them in that moment. But somewhere along the way, we've been told to stop that. That's not proper. Those kind of things. So we want to go to saying that, yes, I feel anxious in this moment. Now, what can I do about it? Because so often when we don't accept this moment, our brain takes us to the future or to the past where our suffering is, because we create all kinds of stories. If we go back to module 1, all kinds of stories around what this means for us. So when we can be with what is in this moment, now we get self-acceptance. So I want you to think about something that you don't accept about yourself, whether it's something about you, whether it's something that you don't accept about others. So often we project our wishes or how we are onto somebody else. And when that happens, we're usually disappointed because they're not doing things the way we want it done, but they're doing the things the way they want to do. And so when we look at what they're doing, we are always setting ourselves up to be disappointed, to thinking, well, now I'm the only one that can do this. It's a pattern that we're creating. But when we know that that person maybe doesn't want to do things the way we do it and they do it a certain way, when we can accept that, now we can make a plan to find a solution. So I hope that makes sense for you. So on the template, I want you to look at writing down what it is that you're not accepting of. And then in the next column, I want you to think about what's the story around not accepting that you're putting out there in the world. And it's something, it's yours, it's something you've hung on to. It might feel like it's part of your identity, but a lot of times we're just holding on to things that make us feel in control that maybe aren't the best for us. And then once you've kind of looked at what you're not accepting, what's the story around it, I want you to take the template from number 2 and look at, am I fitting into this drama triangle? And am I seeing a pattern of what I'm doing? And oftentimes this should bring a lot of awareness to you of what's going on, of the patterns in your life. And now we have awareness, we can start making change. Then the last thing I want you to think about is, what would you do instead of being in the drama triangle with these stories? Because self-acceptance is unconditionally valuing all parts of who you are and accepting you for as you are. And nobody's perfect, so we can just love ourselves unconditionally anyways. And I know most of us are probably not at that spot, and that's a goal to be reached, but we can at least be open to loving who we are and get rid of all the conditioning and the stories of who we think we are or who we've been told we are. But we want to get to that point of acceptance that we can give ourselves permission to feel what we're feeling, to lose that old conditioning that says, oh, it's not that bad, it didn't hurt that much, you shouldn't feel this way or that way. Guess what? Whatever you're feeling is how you should feel. And you should feel that without shame, guilt, or downgrading or judgment upon yourself. Because when we're doing those kind of things, we're actually carrying on conditioning that's been handed down to us that says this is how we have to be, but that's not what we're feeling that we need to be. Another thing to consider is that this doesn't mean we won't ever be in pain, that we won't ever feel discomfort, but it's going to lessen our suffering and the length of time that we suffer. Because as the old saying goes, what we resist persists. So when we can actually be with what is, now we can move on from there. When we acknowledge what's in the room with us, then that loosens that power, loosens that suffering around it so that we can move forward. And as I talked about, accepting of the body acceptance. Now when I can accept, geez, I love and accept myself, that my body's amazing, that I'm here today and breathing, and no matter how out of shape or how good a shape I am, it's still functioning for me and I can appreciate it. Now I can make an action plan because I'm not feeling that I have to guilt and shame and hide myself, and I'm not destructive. So now I'm being creative in my acceptance of myself so that I can create action plans to move towards my goals. What, if you think about it, just imagine that you're accepting yourself, not wasting the energy on the guilt, shame, and blame. What would that feel like to you not to have that judgment or feeling that shame? Do you get relief? Is it scary? What's all coming up for you? And as you're going through this and reading your notes and putting down your thoughts and feelings, please just tap. Again, we're moving this energy to be with what is in the moment. And when you think of all the times that you're spending in judgment and shame and guilt and not accepting what is and wanting something to be different for somebody, you often hear parents, well, I don't want them to feel pain or suffer or get hurt. But really what we're saying is, I don't want to have to deal with that. And that might be a bit hard concept to grasp right now, but think about that. If I'm projecting that onto you, it's because I don't want to have to deal with it. Do I want you to feel pain? No. Do I want you to feel shame or guilt? No. And our good intentions are to help you to go to not feel that pain, to not have to experience those things. But without that experience, you're denying people life and the journey and the learning, because without the pain, we don't get the growth. And it doesn't happen any other way. On the next part, I want you to write down what you would imagine that feels like to just accept things as they are, to not have to change your spouse, your friend, the situation, that you can look at it and then make a plan from there. What would it sound like to you? What kind of thoughts might be going through your head? And what might you be able to do that you didn't do before? So, really sit with those questions and see what comes up for you. And as I said, remember, you've always got the tapping tool and whatever tools that you have in your resource box, because this is a big one. And when we can actually learn to shift our thinking on what acceptance is, we don't have another word for it right now, so that's the best we can do, but it's accepting in the moment what is. So that's very important to grasp right now as we start to up-level ourselves and open up ourselves to greater possibilities. Now, to bring it full circle, I want you to take your original challenge from Module 1 and look at it, all that you've got written down, and see where you're not accepting of yourself or the situation. Look at it from a new lens here. So when we can look at that and see where we're accepting, how would you reframe the story that you wrote down? What's going on? Step back from not accepting, remove the emotions and actually see what is happening. And now when we look at it, there's no right or wrong. So if you feel yourself judging and you have a change of perception, just remember, when you had that challenge, even if it was a day ago, you're still not the same person. So you didn't have the little bit of knowledge that you gained today. So when we can just accept that whatever happened was based on me doing the best I could with the information I had and making choices around that, versus us looking today, knowing we've got these tools that we can do many things. Often we look back in the past and say, I wish I would have done this, I should have done that. But that's not being accepting of what or where we were at in that moment. And then what do you need to feel in the situation that you are denying yourself? So is there something that you're denying or resisting in that? And again, we'll look at what does self-acceptance look like for you, and what would need to change to help you to move closer to that self-acceptance. And finally, your homework for this week, after going through those questions, is create an action plan around self-acceptance and what you will do this next week that will take you into a greater awareness and a step towards actually accepting yourself. We're not going to say that, after doing this, you're going to be 100% accepting of yourself, because you're not, and that's the reality. But if we can take one small step, because as we've talked about before, it's the law of the littles that add up to the big change. It's not the big change that happens, it's all the little things. So when you look at your challenge that you wrote down from Module 1, how big is it feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? And where 1, it's not big at all, and 10, it's too much, I can barely handle it. And if it's greater than a 6, go back to the first module, work through the steps till you get it down and you can get greater clarity on what it is that is the real challenge. So if you start to feel that resistance where you don't want to do it, or you don't want to look at it, or it's too much to handle, then that's where the little gold and the nuggets are that will help to move us forward. So really dig into that, sit with it, and celebrate that you're on your way to self-acceptance. So the goal of this week is really to dig into what our challenges are or have been, what we wrote down, and to explore that challenge on a new degree. And once we look at it with acceptance for what is, how does that change our perception? So be prepared that more resistance is going to come up. Know that you're okay, that you are fully supported, and that you are in control of this process. So it is totally up to you what you do and what you choose to do with it. So cheers to your growth. And as an end out, we're just going to finish with a tap. I'm learning to love and forgive myself for all my selfishness, resentment, critical feelings, judgment for my fellow beings, my self-condemnation and misinterpretation of my life experiences. I bathe myself in generosity, appreciation, praise, and gratitude for my fellow beings, for self-acceptance and enlightenment, understanding of my life experiences. And that was done by Lydia Frederico. And so we thank her for that and enjoy this process as we dig deeper into finding that liberation and into tapping into a more joyful life. So we will see you in Module 4 for self-love.